Hello. I was asked to come to this talk as an academic researcher. I'm currently studying a PhD in Urban Regeneration and the creative community based here in Nottingham. As an academic researcher, if and when I qualify, I become a doctor. I become a doctor of philosophy. And so it was as a philosopher that I decided that, well, we should look at family. And I guess to begin anywhere, we begin with the definition of family. This was a household, a set of parents, a set of relations, a person's children, a lineage, a race, or a group of allied people, which is quite interesting in itself. As a definition of a philosopher, that's a bit harder to actually sort of define. For me, I look into myself, I consider a wider concept, history and evolution that allows us to look at time and how things have developed and evolved, and then try and take all that together and put together an objective so that, I think as it was mentioned earlier, we can lead our lives for a better way and more. I'm struggling with glasses and to read and glasses not to look at you, or not glasses to look at you. So as a philosopher now, I sort of bring together all this concept of family. So equally, as I'm quite nervous doing a talk here, it also becomes a point of therapy, because I'm going to discuss with you family. And that can only be something that's quite personal. I was talking to a few other speakers, and you can't not be personal. It was mentioned earlier. I'm live streaming here and telling you something that is going to be quite personal. So I hope you can forgive me that sort of indulgence. I was born in Berlin. My father was in the forces. He was from Nottingham. And we travelled around the world. I knew one constant as a child. I had my mother, I had my father, I had my sister. I guess I had my family. And moving around the world, there was no one else. We moved, we made friends, we moved, we made friends. But I was also made aware of my extended family. Now, that happened by, I have memories of being a young boy and making little recordings at Christmas, singing songs on a spool-to-spool tape, and my father sort of in control of the microphone and the technology, and my mother dictating our performance to my aunts and uncles who I had no knowledge who they were, but extended family across the world back home. I didn't even know really where home was for that family. So at 6 years old, my father decided that we were to move back to Nottingham. Now, he'd been quite distant from me as a child because of being in the forces. He was sort of away a lot, I guess. And there wasn't a strong relation to us. So as a 6-year-old, I was suddenly displaced to this family home, which was a small terraced house in Cedar Road, a cobbled Cedar Road, up in Sherwood Rise in Nottingham. I lived with my grandparents, my half-uncle, my cousin, my mother, my sister, in a terraced house, coal fire, toilet at the bottom of the garden, all of a sudden displaced into this home, which was in Nottingham, my father's line. Now, I was never made aware of my mother's side. Unfortunately, my mother's parents died when she was young. So I never knew my grandparents, and I was named after my grandfather, Robert Howie, which is of a Scottish line. Now, going back to the definitions of family, there's my household, my set of parents, and so on and so forth. But then I also discovered that I've actually got quite an interesting lineage. I'm a Smith and a Howie. combined together. The Howie, the Scottish side, is son of Hugh MacDonald, dating back to the Isle of Skye. In the 15th century, which is obviously quite a prominent family, say Flora MacDonald, say Bonnie Prince Charlie in the Jacobite Rebellion, etc., etc. And this has always been something I've been rather proud of, my lineage on my Scottish side. On my father's side, my grandfather was a traveller and came to Nottingham from Newcastle. His father came from Ireland and married a Scot, moving to England. And so we just start to understand our lineage, which is a strong concept of the definition of family. Now, let me just get myself on course. Covered all that. And at the same time, living locally, I became aware of my aunts and my uncles and so on and so forth. Weekends were spent visiting, as though we were sort of making up for those first years that we never got to see them. So every weekend we'd go off to see Grandad and Grandma and my uncles and my aunts and my cousins and so on and so forth. And my father and my mother were very, very proud, I think, to sort of insist. Summer holidays, we went to see the extended family around the country. You know, my great uncle and my great aunt and people that I'd never been made aware of, but suddenly appeared. We'd moved home. So to speak. So family was quite a reward and something that I was very aware of at a very, very young age. Now, as an adult, I started to understand the other aspects where we talked about a group of allied people. And I think all of us, as we move through life, we leave our family homes and we become adults and we become responsible for ourselves. We make new friends. From myself, I shared homes with people when I was a young man, and those people I shared a home with became like brothers. Equally, we went out into the city, we made new friends, and so on. Then, gradually, as my career progressed, and I, as mentioned earlier, I used to manage bars and nightclubs in this city as a younger man, and you become responsible for people. You reach the point that you're employing them. And quite often, they're younger than you, or in my situation, they were younger, and you get involved into their caring and their growing up, their change into adulthood, as much myself, and you care for them. You want to make sure that they're achieving their goals as much as you might want to do for your own family, and as much from all I could experience, my parents wanted to do for me. Now, other aspects that came with that was sorry, I've just lost myself. Was an element of loyalty. Now, I've come in my life to understand that loyalty is one of the greatest strengths through very personal reasons that happened when loyalty got lost, which I shall come on to shortly. And at the end of the day, as I explored loyalty, I also explored other aspects that I added to my career. So I did a youth training development. I'm an MVQ youth worker, etc. I've worked with mental health people. I've worked with Alzheimer's. I remember one story where I worked with Alzheimer's and was invited into someone else's family. I was one-to-one caring with the elder father of the family, and was asked to come in to do my job working for Alzheimer's, and watched his decline, and actually over a 3-year period watched him die, and saw the bond of family and to be part of that family. And these were all new experiences. What we thought as children, that, as I said earlier, mother, father, the constant of your family. All of a sudden, there was a wider family, and this was all built up on aspects of emotions, feelings, and caring as you grow to know people. Page 1. Now, I had an interesting part of my career is as an artist. Later in life, I went back to college and started an arts degree as a 30-year-old, which has now led to me doing this PhD several years later. And but as part of it, as an artist, I studied wolves and had quite a reputation in my life for being quite a bit of a wolf man. I lived on a wildlife park for 4.5 years in a caravan next to a wolf enclosure down in Kent, where there were captive animals. I spent 4.5 years comparing a family pack of wolves to human society. And that was my concept as an artist. And that strength of understanding how a wolf pack works, how the elements, the hierarchy of the wolf pack is well structured, and the comparison to how we may have been as perhaps hunter-gatherers, almost emulating the wolf that at that time controlled the Northern Hemisphere, was quite a thought-provoking, time for me, I guess, really, because those comparisons were very strong. And I saw the dominance of the female, I saw the dominance of the male, I saw their roles that they took, and so on and so forth. So from that period, I then entered into, I guess, a change towards family. I actually then started my own. And it was with all this behind me that I assumed my role in a family. I'd seen my father. My father worked so that he could provide, and my mother stayed at home and cared for the children. And obviously, evolution has meant that as we move forward now, there's certain aspects of family values that are starting to change. Being the age I am, I feel that I followed perhaps my father's values, and as a married father and a husband with my own family, I then explored the necessity to work and to work hard. I had to provide, or I felt I had to provide, a home for my family, as is my role, that I feel that society dictates. Now, okay, so when you have your own children, sometimes you forget. You've got one determination. And unfortunately for myself, that strength of having to work actually worked against me in the end, because the struggles, the emotional commitment that went on meant that, unfortunately, my wife and I are now separated. My wife, the other element that was brought up on the definition of family was race. Now, my wife is of Romani culture, and they are very strong in family. And I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but the bond that I saw was within her family was very different from my own. Now, my father died, and that's when it started to hit home a certain aspect of what family really is, because for once in my life, I actually felt that I was totally alone. My wife and I were separating. My children, unfortunately, were moving away, and my father had died. And although my mother was still there, this is the point I felt that this is me now, and this is me making the decisions for me, and obviously where my responsibility lies with my family, my new family. Now, unfortunately, as we go through this, do we sort of sit there and let society's values dictate and blame us? And I sort of think not. I didn't want to succumb to the pressure of it, and that aspect of it has made me sort of learn that we've got to really sort of try to find this balance if we're to make family and we're to make the pressures of society sort of change. Now, the closing point of all this is that unfortunately, I've come as a philosopher to start to recognize and experiences of my own life that family values and the definition of family is perhaps changing. Unfortunately, I went through a very bad experience when Phil and Karen asked me to do this talk. Just at the time that they asked me, was that my wife, or my soon-to-be ex-wife, chose to take away the rights for me to be a family member and decided to close down contact with me and my children. And it was at this point then that I entered into the legal system, and I began to understand that there is no law to protect family. We have, in this change of the definition of family, new statistics that come to the table. My values were based perhaps on post-Victorian, even pre-war, where if a father separated or if a family separated, the children would automatically go to the father. At some point, the rules changed. Now we live in a society where if a family separates, the children automatically go with the mother. Now, we've reached a point that there are now 2 million single parents in this country, where half of those were married. We've also reached a point that 23% of our children are being raised by single parents. 9 out of 10 of those are by the mother. The mother has become the new head of the family that is proving, I believe, that those values that we had before are now changing in the concept of family. When I talk to this small percentage, and it is still a smaller percentage, it seems that the stories are similar and they're on the increase. And we've reached the point that there is no law to protect those single fathers that, from my experience, seem to be on the increase. We've almost swapped round this Victorian sort of attitude almost to the modern days where the glove is on the other hand. Is that the correct saying? However, we're still encouraged as single parents to be part of a family, as the legal responsibility of my children is still there. I have parental responsibility for my children, but what I find is that actually I don't have choice. The choice is in the role of the mother in this situation. And what I think I'd like to just end on is that if these family values are to be restored or balanced, then we should look at the situation that is separating families, and we should look at the situation that makes it fair, that we do reach a level of equality in family, even with those people that separate. 100 years ago, we changed the rules, or the rules that were there 100 years ago, we changed because it favored one side of family. Now, it favors the other. I don't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, are we not just leading ourselves to somewhere that we didn't want to be before? We should find a balance. And at the end of the day, we'll resolve ourselves. I know my children will be part of my life and part of my family in the future. And in the meantime, I guess I've just got to get on with it and look at the extended family, the people that are around me now, the people that care, the big family that we have that I work with, and hope that in the future the laws that protect us will come into hand and can make family be restored for even those people that are perhaps missing out at the moment. Thank you.